Cook it with emotion. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone, or those who are just joining the Regional Network Forum, or those who have been trucking it through all day. This session is ruining more lives faster, which I think is something that we're probably all very qualified to do. My name is Kay Morrison. I am a Burning Man Project board member. I'm also a Meta Regional contact, and I work with the Iron Monkeys Arts Collective. We had our first day in the shop today since COVID. It's very, very exciting. Just to frame this discussion a little bit, I know that we've all lived through the world this past year, but way back in the beginning of the regional network, it was really just sort of a spark. It was a little kindling in the man's eye. You know, it started, you know, the epic story of George Papp coming back from Burning Man in 1997 with the event in financial straits, going back to Austin and saying, we want to throw an event, we want to get some money for you. And from there, things just continued to grow. There started to be more events. There started to be regional contacts who supported the communities around the world and connected wannabe burners, current burners, would-be burners with the greater network. Then people started creating entities, like a bunch of us here are board members or have been board members of local entities. And then BWBs started coming around, and then we started doing civic work. And that just continues to expand. There's not been a slowdown of the way that we as burners interact with the world around us since the beginning of burn time. And how we're interacting in our local communities and also in our networks of communities continues to expand. And everything was kind of going along at a pretty, oh yeah, it does. Going on at a pretty, you know, interesting rate. People were doing things, different divisions of BWB and local organizations and events all started doing their own things, and then COVID. And so all of our regular rhythms got disrupted. All those things, those cadences that we had built sort of got disrupted. And we had to figure out a new way to spread our weird and wonderful energy in the world. And, you know, there are plenty of examples of this. Pie Shoot, Marco mentioned at a conversation earlier, which was up here in Seattle, just down the street from me, actually. I can walk to the Pie Shoot, where some burners set up a shoot on their stairway and invited the entire neighborhood, the entire city to come and get pies, and had to educate people about, no, you don't need to pay us for this. This is a gift. And that inspired my entire neighborhood to do candy shoots for Halloween, where everybody designed these artistic candy shoots and got involved. So that was a spark. Drive-through art events, which were great, which were so inclusive of communities, gave so much hope to people during this time. And then, you know, we also have things like mutual aid, like the burners in Austin who figured out how to deliver firewood and water during the freeze there a few months ago. So all of these things are things that we as burners do in our events or in our sort of closed communities without thinking about it. But when COVID changed our lives, this cup of goodness runneth over, and we started doing more things out in the world. So with that sort of background, as we're starting to emerge from COVID, how do we continue building on this collaborative community thing that we do so damn well? And where do we want to do it? Are we looking to expand our collaborations locally, like within our towns and cities? Are we looking to expand our collaborations more across our familial networks, like Burners Without Borders, or event production, or business entities? Or are we looking to learn more from the global network, where, like, what do you have to learn? What do you have to teach, and what do you want to learn to try to expand this thing that we're doing? So with that background, I want to have a discussion, and the way that I'd love to do this is if you have a thing you want to say, if you'll just type hand in the chat, and I will keep stack of who has something to say. And as always, you know, we ask you for some ground rules of, you know, be respectful, listen to what people are saying, speak from your own perspective, be aware of how much time you're taking, share the air. We'll do one conversation at a time, so please keep yourself muted if you're not the person speaking. You know, show your support, hands, funny dances. And if things are, this should be a call, this is being recorded, but if there are things that feel confidential, like let us know if you don't want it to be shared, and maybe don't go posting people's personal stories all over the internet. So with that, my first question is, sorry, I'm going to close this window, is so where we're at right now in this world, what are some collaborative successes that you've experienced in the last 2 years? So not 10 years ago, but like the year prior to COVID, up through COVID. Like, what are some of the collaborative efforts? Oh, I love it, hands already. That your community or your team or your set of peers have had? And has it been in your region? Has it been across your network, or has it been globally? And I already see a hand. Molly, go for it.
Yeah, so this has been my first year really diving into Burners Without Borders. And I've only lived in Oregon for a couple of years. I come originally from the Texas burner community. And we started with the Burners Without Borders chapter, mutual aid effort during the wildfires. So I had never experienced West Coast wildfires like we did this year. So it was really emotional and really intense, and there was a lot going on. And I really just learned entirely about the concept of mutual aid, which I'm actually going to talk about a little bit in the next breakout session. But I would say a success that we had was we had a big group of people, burners in Portland, who are heavily like immunocompromised from respiratory diseases of various different kinds. It was like a house of them. And I think it didn't end up actually working out, but the Boise burners instantly raised their hand and said, anybody from Portland who's having smoke trouble can come here tomorrow to our community center. We'll set you up. We have showers. We have people who can loan tents or camper vans or whatever, and they'll be good to go within 24 hours. And I say it didn't end up working out because about halfway through that 24 hours, the smoke traveled to Boise. So they ended up, I think, going to Colorado. So I still consider it a huge win because it was just the regional network at work. It was just like, I had met these people a couple of times, but they were excited to welcome burners into their space with open arms, just to have solidarity with each other when everyone was experiencing something that like just immediately ignites your fight or flight response when the sky is orange. So yeah, that was a really cool off playa moment.
I think that's such an interesting thing that's come out of this year with the wildfires, with what happened in Austin, that I didn't really think about it prior to a lot of these catastrophic events, that we are people who build our own infrastructure. So we have infrastructure. Even if we're not BWB, even if we just have a water cube or a trailer, like we are people who have infrastructure. And it was so great to see that just fly out when needed. So it'd be very cool to see more of that. Who else? What other kind of live, online, virtual collaborations have you felt were successful in the past year and a half? Yeah, Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I mentioned it in the previous plenary, but I'd probably just go into a little bit more detail in this session. So we are coming out of actually coming into COVID. A group of us were going to get together and think about a regional burn in Victoria, which is our state in Australia. So a call that went out on Facebook beginning of 2020. We were going to do a camp out in April, but then of course COVID hit, and so we moved everything online. And we were talking very generally around we were talking very generally around a regional burn, but at the same time, we we felt that there was probably more we could explore as a community. And so we were meeting every fortnight on Zoom. And so what emerged, and sort of who I'm here on behalf of today, is an entity called Common Arts Victoria, which has been set up to tooled to do a burn, but actually to do a bunch of other things as well. And so it really is, you know, it's going to become a vehicle for community collaboration and community expression. But we don't necessarily want to tie it to a yearly event. So, you know, we want to iterate, we want to flex and bend. So the metaphor we're kind of using is, I think in sort of Japan, they will build their buildings to bend when there's an earthquake, right? So how can we use that as a metaphor for our organization? And so how can we bend and flex when different challenges arise? Because I think, as I said in the plenary, you know, obviously pandemics. In Victoria, we've been dealing with crazy bushfires. So fire is an ongoing risk. Again, in Victoria, there's an increased focus and police presence on our kinds of events. More of a crowded space. And so we need that flexibility to adapt, but also to know that I think inclusion demands of us to actually think about different ways we can draw on these kinds of entities to push the culture forward, right? So not everyone can or should or wants to go to a burn, right? But if we want to be inclusive, well, then we have to think about other processes, other structures. So what we talk about is, how do we use this as a way to address the cultural and structural barriers to inclusion? And part of that is thinking about different things that we might do that is burn adjacent, but not the burn itself. So that's sort of what's emerged. It's been this really organic sort of emergent process. We, you know, originally we're just going to do a burn, and well, actually, let's take a step back, think a bit deeper, think a bit broader, and sort of common arts is sort of what's evolved through that process.
I think I really love what you said about this in the plenary, and I love what you're saying about it now. I think for a very long time, a lot of us, I will say certainly the organization that I worked with, was thinking about annual events. Like, we were replicating Black Rock City in a lot of ways. And so you had an event every year, and that takes so much resource. It takes human resource, it takes emotional resource, it takes financial resource. And if we are, I'm going to keep quoting Marlon, if we're trying to set everybody on fire, like, how do we spread that spark around in a way that is going to ignite more people's passions than just the people who buy tickets and plan to go? Where's the inspiration? Like, how do you surprise people with their own creativity?
Absolutely. And just the point I just very quickly want to add to that is, so we had our leadership summit yesterday at Bonza, which stands for Burners of New Zealand and Australia, our Bonza summit yesterday. And we had a wonderful speaker talk, a woman named Jo Roberts, who's speaking, I think, in the next breakout session about the work that she's doing. And really, her talk really got me thinking about the role of time in what we do, and actually how sort of the capitalist model like pushes us to breaking point. And so what is the role of rest in what we do? So we do say, well, look, maybe we'll do 2 events and then every third year will be a year off, or maybe we've had a really bad year, everyone's a bit burnt out, we're all at each other's throats a bit, let's take a break, recoup and come back. And I think the pandemic, 2 years off Black Rock City, you know, maybe there's other ways Black Rock City can be done that doesn't just push people to burn out and breaking points. Just, I don't know, just a provocation I'd put out there.
Definitely. I heard from a lot of my longtime burner friends last year that they're like, I'm so bummed the Black Rock City is canceled, but I'm going to paint my house. Like, holy crap, all of a sudden I have the permission to do something else, to spend my energy somewhere else. And that's sort of what I think is interesting about this conversation, and the things that, Marty, what y'all are doing with Common Arts, and Molly, what happened with BWB in Portland was there were other opportunities to put our creativity to work.
Absolutely.
And Lord knows we do not have a lack of creativity or the ability to make bad decisions or to work too hard. So you're good people to be taking this challenge. Is there someone else out there has a story in the past couple of years of a collaboration that maybe surprised you, something your community did that brought people together in a way that was unexpected?
I guess I would jump in with one thing that I felt like we did pretty well right before the pandemic in Seattle was sort of move to this model for our decompression event that allowed everybody to participate for free in all ages in one space. And then also the inside party sort of subsidized that and some other art and things that were 21 and over, and just allowed us to actually have the event, give out like an unprecedented amount of grants for our organization, and then also to like have a successful event that actually operated as a fundraiser, because, you know, and I think we're gonna certainly just one of the breakout sessions earlier, there was a good conversation about, you know, a little more of a blended model now as the Burning Man community is on the is a lot more out in the world, or a lot of our creative energies are being directed outward or in our local communities or our own houses, and creating spaces for people to gather that are still safe. And so I think, you know, as that happens too, we also have to acknowledge that like artists still got to make a living, or a lot of them, you know, it's not just a hobby for. And so, you know, as the Burning Man community is trying to be more inclusive and connected to the broader art scene in Seattle, at least, you know, finding ways that our events avoid, you know, commodification, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no commerce existing there, like that you can't, you know, buy something that an artist has there, and doing these sort of events that just have a different center and a different focus than Black Rock and then our festivals.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So I work with the Iron Monkeys, and we received a grant for 2020. Of course, we didn't go. Burning Man actually gave us the money for 2021. We're still not going, but it has provided us that collaboration between the Burning Man Project and our arts organization, and the support that they have for us is going to push us to put up our art in places that it's never been put up before. We're going to put it up in, you know, a town down the road. We're going to set it up in the street. We're going to take that creativity and word of the pandemic and pivot to still use our creativity and our love of gathering people, but in a way that is so much more inclusive than it was, and that we didn't completely go out of pocket for it. So that was a really great support of the organization. Yes, pivot and unprecedented. Exactly, Squisha. Yeah, and big props to Ignition Northwest for continuing to grow and shift. Done a great job. So I'll give it just one more second to see if anybody has a collaborative story for the past couple years that they'd like to talk about. How did they get their spark out into the world, be it locally or across the world? All right, great. So my next collaboration, or my next question, is maybe at a slightly longer time frame. Because the final question that we're going to ask here is, how can collaboration be more facilitated, and what does that look like? So on a maybe bigger time frame, are there collaborations that you've done either within your local community, like between a city and an organization, a nonprofit organization, or between Burners Without Borders Mars and Burners Without Borders Venus, or with the Burning Man Project, or with the regional network that didn't work, that seemed like it should have worked, but for some reason fell short? Because I know you have those stories. Yeah, Molly.
So I think we have two people from Seattle here, right? It looks like Marco and was Ben there. Are you from Seattle too?
Yeah.
So you guys may have more context on this than I do, because I joined the Precipitation Northwest board in the best year ever, 2020. But there was the year prior, in 2019, there was an attempt to do a board exchange program at our regional burn. And I think people went into it thinking like, oh, this is going to be so great. Like, we're going to invite these board members from Seattle, and, you know, they're going to see how we do things and take the lessons back. And then we'll go to Critical Northwest and we'll take the lessons back. And it's like so doable and great. And I think my perspective of it, just from somebody who came in, game of telephone late, finding out what happened, is that really like, they just kind of came and nothing really, there was like no formalized program or follow-up. And that was just as much on, our part as y'all's. Maybe you guys got a lot from it and it was awesome. But I think physically going to each other's burns, while it's great, I think that there's room for like all of this work that we do leading up to the burns. And I want to kind of dive more into that collaboration in the regional network. Because the stuff that we do at burns themselves, it doesn't necessarily feel like the best time to really sit back and ideate and collaborate when we're kind of like running around and doing stuff. So I put up a sticky note in the Media C forum earlier today, and I chatted with some folks in France and Germany about it. We were just kind of talking through, like spitballing some stuff. But I think if we could formalize a program to basically, I know there are tons of resources out there, right? The person from Germany told me like RASPA has the regional burn Bible, and like, he's going to send me that over email and we can look at it together and see what lessons, we can derive from it and stuff like that. And we do Safety Northwest, which is like a safety, regional event. But I think that we're often as regionals kind of reinventing the same wheel all at the same time. And while we all have specifics to our region and we want to do things differently, I think that like, as we're dealing with COVID and as we're connecting today, and as we're dealing with like really heavy inclusion stuff that we all want to work on, I guess I would just say, I would hope that, and maybe it doesn't have to be formalized, but maybe there's a way that we can all kind of collaborate better in one place, and learn and teach from each other. And I don't know what that format would look like, but whether it's going to each other's events physically or like shadowing each other, I think we're all pretty busy. So that's a lot, but at the same time, if I could go see how a program or an event or an operations piece was working really well in another region and bring that back, it would actually save us time in the long run. So would love to offer that to somebody else too.
I think that's such a good point. And it's definitely something that I've seen as well. It's really exciting to go and do the learning. It's much less exciting to do the report out or to do the, like, you get back and you're like, okay, now write the report about what you learned. It's like, yeah. So I don't have the answer, but I absolutely say I hear you. And I think that thinking more about how we lean on each other's shoulders and really are able to come to completion with these amazing amounts of mentorships and many learnings would be fantastic. Maybe taking smaller bites, maybe, I don't know. We can continue talking about that. I saw Marco's hand, and then after that, I see John Mack. So Marco?
Sure. So I was going to share the events that we'd had in the past. So in 2014, and then was it 2019, we had the Pacific Northwest Leadership Summit, where we invited board members and community organizers from Vancouver, Portland, Spokane. We had the Boise people out, I think, at the last one, and got together in the sort of makerspace that Ignition Northwest was managing at the time. So I think that was 2019, I think. And we did a lot of this sort of sharing of best practices, and people gave presentations about, hey, this is what we're doing. What are y'all doing? And there was breakout sessions. It was very much sort of like a mini GLC or a mini regional forum. And I know we'd like to do it again. It's just a question of the time, the place, and the availability of people to get together and talk about things.
So I have a question for both you, Marco and Molly. For Marco, since I see you're off mute, I'll ask you first. Was the Northwest Leadership Conference inspired by the regions from the Northwest? Was it a kickoff that was inspired by the Burning Man project? Like, Who started that?
I would say it's probably inspired by the GLC, the Global Leadership Conference that many of us had attended, that was hosted by the Burning Man Project. And we wanted to have something local that didn't require travel to the Bay Area, make it easier for people nearby to get together and discuss similar topics.
And did you have any collaboration with the Burning Man Project?
I think we did it all on our own, and Ben might be able to chime in. I see his hands raised because he was definitely a big part of it. Prior to the
part of the second one, sure, which was, to the point about reinventing the wheel, like, yes, we do, even within our own organizations, always end up doing that. And about that exchange program, as it is relevant to everything that we're talking about, how we really carry those lessons learned forward. I think part of the problem, like, we did create some shared resources, we had a shared drive and really did try to keep energy and momentum going, but also I think there was a sense that what we did want to avoid creating one more meeting that, I think everybody's in this group certainly has experienced meeting man, and really those opportunities to connect at each other's burns, I thought were really the meat of it, because we did kind of know who to reach out to personally. Now, understanding there's always turnover and you're always dealing with that. And that's part of the transition of turning these, backyard clubs into like legitimate large organizations, which, no doubt, obviously, Kay and all of Burning Man is no stranger to. And I think in terms of those means of resource sharing, though, it seems like a lot of work is being done in that realm now that people have had a little chance to step back from their events and kind of adapt.
Awesome, thank you. And Molly, I just want to ask you that question just to tie the end up here. Was that exchange between SOAK or Precipitation Northwest and Ignition Northwest inspired by those two organizations, or was it asked for by someone else? Do you know?
Okay, trying to unmute. I don't know, but we were super psyched to attend in 2020. And it was the exact weekend that lockdowns began. So we weren't really all like as a world, we weren't all comfortable in this virtual space really yet. Like, we weren't, it wasn't like Zoom life, it was just like, oh, should we do it online? Is that even going to be useful? So we are going to plan for 2022 in Boise, Idaho, and we're going to keep doing it every year and rotate locations. So it was in Seattle, as mentioned already, and then we'll do it in Boise next time, and then we'll swing back around to Portland eventually. But I think for us, it's really exciting because we still have a lot of work to do on our space, on our venue, workshop space, clubhouse, whatever you want to call it. So we're really excited to see the Boise space because they're doing a lot of really, really fucking cool things over there. So we want to I think physically going and checking it out is going to be awesome.
That's awesome. So sounds to me like that is community-driven community development. So fuck yeah. John Mack, what do you have to say?
Sure. I couldn't get to Bonza yesterday, even on Zoom, but I'm sort of hugely impressed when we went there 2019, and this is an official regional get-together with Justin McGee. We had 3 continents represented, Asia through Taiwan and China, Africa through Africa Burn and New Zealand, Australia, the burns there. And we're a bit thin on the ground on this side of the planet, but it was hugely effective when I was there in 2019 in sort of binding us together. And the sort of that echoes down, I still have connections with people from all those places. I just wanted to pick up, because I love a beautiful metaphor, we're talking about reinventing wheels. There is something about the whole burniverse, if you like, is that we do have 1,000 sparkling, amazing wheels, and sometimes that's not a bad thing. When we're burning effort and killing ourselves, there's the classic reinventing. Oh God, I wish I'd known someone else is doing that, is one aspect of it. But the other aspect is it's in this burn universe we've created. There's the most extraordinary range of solutions unique to that context. And it's just beautiful to look at that. And when you understand more solutions in more contexts, it makes you nimble. It's not really about finding the perfect burn solution, but sort of being aware of just how strange a creature we are. And I was just thinking about this notion of, you know, how do you sell the burn to the world? In some ways, we present ourselves to the world as this one thing, and it's very much dominated by Burning Man. It's just the media does it, even if we're trying to sort of subvert that, if you like, in the regional network. And it's sort of, you know, if you like it, you're in, and if you don't like it, you don't even walk up to the door. So, you know, one of my notions, and we talked about this, about how to spread the burn message into the wider world, was spreading stories, because you can't personally contact everyone, but it's the stories that get out there. And I know in a lot of regionals, there's actually an aversion to the media. We tend to go to remote places and, you know, we actually exclude the media and things like that, and regard them as dangerous, because they've told terrible stories about them. I mean, at first acquaintance, you know, the stories they tell about us are, you know, outrageous in some cases. You know, they'll put photos of our naked people on their front covers of their newspapers. But there is an element there where you actually have to sort of join them to change them. And, you know, we haven't really done much in terms of developing our media savvy down at the regional level. And, you know, that's always that danger. You know, if you join them, do you actually end up losing your own culture? And, you know, if you become spin doctors, you know, what do you lose? Can you be ethical? Can you ethically spin the burn concept? The other thing is, I just quickly want to mention, when you do talk about reinventing the wheel, this is one of the things, and I know it's happening in many forums at the Burning Wiki, and we've also developed a burn policy matrix, is we go and scrape all of the policies out of all of the burns worldwide, and we put them in a core document. Now, the Burning Wiki's got a section on burn policies, and the matrix is another method where we just simply link to all of those. And this was developed not so much for the burns who are already there, because frankly, most of us know pretty much what we're doing, but it was developed for those people who want to initiate a burn, people who want to come from, and that was the notion of the Burning Wiki, is giving that ramp up to people who say, well, how do I do this? And not even knowing who to ask. It was a place they can sort of, a giant menu, and then in their context, recognize what looks familiar and then go and contact those people. But and I will conclude, the most powerful thing, of course, is always personal contact. And I love that, the Africa burn thing, you know, the each one teach one. But we could also do each one teach many. And, you know, there's been an opportunity, if we turn our focus away from the actual burn events, which we've been forced to do, and, you know, think about that, think about those other community groups. And I'm the hugest fan of Figment, absolutely. And if no one's ever heard of it, look into it. It's essentially taking the burn culture into the community. We did something in Fremantle, they did it in Melbourne many years ago, and I know it's been on hold for 2 years, but I'd just love to see Figment come back in as many places as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I also think you're right about media. Like, if you don't tell your own story, then who tells it for you? They're challenging things to do. I think one of the things that I've been hearing that I find interesting, not surprising, but interesting, is we do reinvent the wheel so often. And I don't know if that's necessarily bad. Like, I feel like my like organizational brain is like, well, there should be a way to do things, but that's not really who we are. Like, our culture is not that way. And our culture is so transitory that there's always someone new who wants to do something that someone's already done before. And who are we to stop them from doing what they want to go do? Which poses an interesting challenge in, well, how do we take our passions and our skills and our curiosities and our need for a wheel and support each other in that? Like, it's sounding to me like some of what you're all saying is, it's not so much telling people how to do things, it's showing them how you do things and letting them go back and glean whatever they have learned from that. So on that premise, like, how do we facilitate more of that many to many, that one to many? sharing, be it across, again, be it across your town or your state, be it across your event organizers or your BWB chapters, or from the Burning Man organization down. Like, what are ideas that, what can we bubble some ideas up about opportunities? Like, we can pie in the sky this, like, we don't have to talk about real, we can just talk about, like, let's brainstorm. What are things that would make it, that would spark your curiosity, that would help you get out and light more people on fire, either organizationally or personally? Can you, or tell us a story about something that did? I know all you fuckers have been inspired.
Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I can jump in. Oh, I forgot about the hand comment thing.
Go, girl.
So I used to work in a network of environmental nonprofits, and we really made it, it was different because it was a paying job, you know, we were full-time in these roles. So we really implemented a program where every office would sort of hold space for a certain period of time. Let's say it's 2 weeks, or it's an event or a ticket or whatever you want to call it, that was always available and open for somebody from another region to come. And that could be, like, depending on what your organization looks like, it could be attending a board meeting or doing a volunteer shift of some kind, or helping build an art project or whatever it may be. But it was this sort of formalized thing that this space was always going to be open. So you constantly had somebody from another region just sitting there working alongside you. And it wasn't, this is how I do it and I do it better. It wasn't, you know, this is the wheel and you can't reinvent it because it's going to look like not as good as my wheel. It was just like, hey, I'm going to come here and work with you for a short amount of time, however long that makes sense. And it was really, really cool. I don't know exactly how that would look, since, as you alluded to, and as we all know, our communities are all so different in what we do, but maybe it looks like, you know, we're going to hold space for somebody from another region at our decompression party every year. Or maybe it looks like a regional leadership conference like we're doing in the Pacific Northwest. And I guess where I'm going with this, just in my mind, is I love conferences, and like today has been really inspiring and really great. But I learn a lot more when I'm like in the shit with somebody, whatever shit that may be. So I wonder if there's a way that we could accomplish that in our network. That is like, somebody from another region is always going to be invited to be there. And it's just kind of part of the culture. That sort of exists to a certain extent, but it feels like it would take a lot of work for me to be like, hey, Critical Northwest, I know you know us and you love us and we know and love you too, but can I come like just hang out in your board meeting, or can I come do XYZ? It feels like it would take coalition building and relationship building and asking and talking and planning. And maybe if there was a more formalized sort of situation, it would just be like an expected part of how we operate. So maybe I'm just harping on this idea, but that's kind of my piece.
Yeah, no, normalizing person sharing. I think that's great. It's human exchange. That's what we do. And not just necessarily for the parties, but for the boring shit that I think many of us on this call have done, the board meetings and the budgets and the documents and all that. We can have fun too, but yeah, normalizing people sharing, I think that's great. Hey, Human, what you got? And I see you, John Mack.
You guys can hear me okay? Yep. No? No. Can't hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you. You sound great.
All right. Okay. Still hear me okay? Because I just changed the setting.
Yep, still hear you.
Cool. Okay, look, I just jotted down some notes which have bugbeared me. For those that don't know me, I've been a regional contact since the early 2000s. I think I was one of the early ones. And I want to raise in this particular audience the belief system change. And just imagine that it's 2115 someone found a USB with the original notes of the 10 principles. And we look at them and go, oh my God, look at what they wrote like 60 years ago. How did they change? Are we allowing them to change, or are we rusted on fundamentalists? And so to me, this role of the Dead Sea Scroll and the generation of burners that have been attached to that, and then looking at data such as 90% of our carbon footprint is getting to the playa and getting back, does that fundamentally require a reworking of the Dead Sea Scrolls into a contemporary St. John's Bible sort of type thing, where new information is available and now maybe we manifest our faith a little bit different? And if so, how do we manifest that faith different? And I hear lots of stuff about leadership, and leadership's a very overworked term, in my opinion, in Burning Man. And I'd love to see a hell of a lot more about how do you build collaboration? How do you build consensus? And not just expect commercial little babies born at 00 to get to 50 and somehow go to burn and be woke and wow, they know all the skill sets they're meant to know. And yeah, that's sort of it. And time zones, guys. I reckon the time zones are a killer. And I would love to see the meta committee look at some way that it could split into 3, maybe 4 different time zones around the world, that we could get some autonomy and start building on the really good work that, say, Bonds has done in this area, and I'm sure Europe has done in their area, just so, you know, chuck in daylight savings. I don't even know what day it is sometimes. Thank you.
Yeah, heard on all those points. I think that's, and thank you for raising them. Yeah, I absolutely agree that we need to continue evaluating where we are. And I think rusted on is a good way to, describe it, as something we should be aware of. Absolutely. And also with my meta hat on, heard. The next hand I saw was John Mack, and I saw Ben, but now it's gone. But I see John Mack.
We were talking about sharing humans between burns and finding some comfortable space for people to slot into it. It's very hard to sort of come in and sit on a board and sort of say, hey, I'm not here to tell you anything, I'm just here to listen. People who tend to do that tend to be people who are used to telling people how to do things. There was and is a very successful program between New Zealand, Australia about sharing, and I think it pulled in Africa as well, sharing volunteers. And there you've got a already built, if you like, structure that you invite someone in with an expertise in safety or sustainability or ranges, and you've got a comfortable space for them to go into, and you could, you know, they're useful. There's no awkwardness about, you know, why are they here, you know, on either side, why am I here, why are they here? They fit in. The only problem about exchanging volunteers in that thing, it does build very, very strong connections immediately, pardon me, but they tend to go into the volunteer group in the host place, and those tend to be the only people who they meet. There's no opportunity for them to sort of share stories with the broad community and people at the governance level, which it's sort of like, it'd be nice if you sort of had a program where, okay, you volunteer for the event, now we want to grab you for, you know, a session, whether an on-playa, and I like the idea of on-playa stuff happening with governance groups, committees, you know, come and talk to us about your experience in your burn, and tell me about your experience at this burn, you know, something to, at the wind up of the burn. You know, it's a bit like the classroom, you drag the kid out the front. What did you do on your holiday? But certainly the intro for those people, swapping volunteers is a very good way of sharing humans. The only other thing I quickly wanted to say is talking about how do you inculcate things, you know, what can burns do? We do miss the message, what can theme camps do? Theme camps tend to operate much more in the community already in terms of running events, and especially music camps like that. They're out there doing stuff all the time. Theme camps aren't really strong on culture, I'm afraid, not as strong as they could be, but that's something we could help them with, you know, as the burn community, help the theme camp community get stronger in terms of culture. And I would actually in some ways like to see people arrive at the burn not via the gate as new participants, but via theme camp membership. And that's happening anyway, because to get into some of these burns, you have to be a theme camp member. And I don't want them to all be the same sort of people all the time. I'd like to actually get theme camps open to the idea, you are now the doorway for new people to join Burn Society. And your responsibilities at theme camp, and I'll help you with it, is to inculcate these people into burner culture. And a theme camp is a nice little micro community. You know, it's a warm embrace. And if they're bringing these people on board effectively, then, you know, they're coming on board. We get a lot of people walk in the gate, they walk out of the gate at the event, end of the event. They've had a few interesting experiences, but they still haven't got the message. It's just been too dazzling. They sort of spin out at the end of it, confused, and they wander off. Now, we might get some of them coming back, but I think we lose a lot of them. Whereas in the embrace of a theme camp, that keeps on going. A theme camp is a 12-month thing. So just a bit of a thought in that direction about using theme camps as well as burns.
Yeah, and I also think there's a huge opportunity to use theme camps in the real world, you know, like get your theme camp together to do a beach cleanup, get your theme camp together to do a free lemonade stand and like onesie dance party in the middle of winter. I don't know, but that kind of thing that pushes that year-round creativity and collaboration out into the world. I'm just going to give a time check. We have 14 minutes. I see Ben's hand up, so I want to hear what he has to say, and then see what we can do to wrap this up on time.
Thanks. Yeah, I just responsive to a human's discussion about the term leadership getting overused and just how we think of it. Just something that somebody had mentioned earlier in the session that I thought was a really cool focal point was talking about stewardship rather than leadership. And I think, you know, a lot of us operate as maybe stewards of organizations in a leadership context, but then Africa Burn was talking about, you know, the off year has given them space and time to purchase land that now they are the stewards of year round, and rather than leave no trace, it's leave a positive trace. And I think just in terms of our discussion about the good we can do in the world this year, you know, it is kind of freeing not to have an event in some ways.
I love that language change, and I definitely I see you, Stephen. I definitely think that language change that I've been trying to use is like how do we leave a positive trace, and that just changes the way my mind sits so tremendously. What you got, Raspa?
Just a minor correction. Africa Burn didn't buy the land. They actually were brought on to be stewards of the land by a nonprofit that technically is the caretaker of the property, but very much like your focus on stewardship. And also want to add that sometimes we've used the term servant leadership, but I've also noticed that the culture is flexible enough that the Nordic community just calls everybody a co-creator. They really don't even like anything. They don't say volunteers. They don't say participants. So it's interesting to see how the language can affect, in some ways, a feeling of hierarchy, even when we don't mean it. And I've been taking some notes for the regionals committee. This has been really helpful. I do want you here to know that there is a kind of a leadership summit in a box toolkit that was created by members of the Meta committee. And other ways of maybe not reinventing the wheel as much or doing more sharing have included, there have been some event exchange programs. The BRC mentorship program that we started in Black Rock City was kind of replicated by Africa Burn in Chicago that had a sharing thing. And I love this feedback because we'd love to encourage more of like a cross mentorship and learning program among the different regional events. It happens quite informally, but I agree with you. I think it was Molly that it would be good if it was a little bit more formalized. Also, just want to say that our hope is with Hive that some of the trainings and learning can be accessed by members of the community so that there won't be as much reinventing of the wheel. And for those of you that have leadership, not leadership, let's not even use that term, have experience in certain areas, you could share that experience with members of the community through Hive at some point. We're getting to that level. So just wanted to chime in because this has been very helpful, I think. We've been trying to figure out how to have more peer-to-peer support throughout the network and share more knowledge and more learning and more of the cultural orientation so that, there's many pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And all of the the sharing of humans thing that have happened have been really inspiring. And I think it's also important to remember in that really human tone that like Burning Man is made out of people. Like we may love spreadsheets and we may love, oh, my cat joins every Zoom call I'm on. Hi, Knuckles. While it's great to share that information, we really are made out of people and we're inspired by other people, by what other people do, by these art card they made, by the grant they wrote. Oh, he really wants to help. Look, isn't this sweet? So facilitating more of that. And I think we've done a bang up job this past year of moving our very personal culture into an online format. But man, we're going to explode when we're able to get back together, and the kinds of things that we're going to be able to do is tremendous. And there was one thing, and then I'll see if anybody has final comments, that this fucking cat, man, every fucking Zoom call, everyone. I remember who was saying it earlier. It might've been John, but it reminded me of one of my favorite things that Caveat says about Burning Man culture, which I always misquote, which is in Burning Man culture, it's three things. We're having the most fun. Having this fun is good for you. And do you want to go with us? And I think that really applies to so much, be it events, be it mentorships, be it onesie lemonade stands. Like going out there and having fun is what's infectious. And going out there and having a good time and being creative is what inspires us to keep doing it. Like, I mean, if having your kind of fun is death metal camps, then that's great. But if having your fun is lollipops and like, I don't know, mini trikes racing down hills, like that's good too. Like find your fun and it will be infectious. It's fucking good for us. So we've got 8 minutes left. I'm wondering if anybody has a summation or a final thought or something they want to make sure that we get here. I see you, A Human, go ahead.
I just want to point out a project that I have taken on, and I'm going to believe that this is the first or one of the early times we'll announce it. In 4 to 5 years, we want you guys at a burn on a tropical island off the Barrier Reef. That's what I'm setting my sights on. And how we're going to achieve that is by not trying to find a burner company or group of people that exist in tropical North Queensland, because they sort of don't. They don't look like burners, they're just not there. But the words, the principles don't have a look, they're just type. And so we're jettisoning these words into a local arts organization. And we're having them look at, can they just turn their town, the front yards, take a leaf out of that arts where the people just did the thing camps in the front yards, and people can camp in front yards, and the pub is the venue and the park is the venue. And how can that happen? And build that community in that town that then is looking at the tropical island just off their beach going, so you want us to do that over there? Well, that would be nice, you know, that would be cool. But the idea is we're not going to try and say, hey, let's build a burner community. It's like Babinda is going to just build a community that's influenced through burner principles. So it's our first effort to partner with an organization, with them being the people to put down the effort on the ground. And how that will look, no idea. So yeah, I thought we'd just mention that from a partnering angle. Thank you.
I'm gonna cry. That's fucking awesome. How exciting. And I will be there. Thank you for the invite. We've got about 6 minutes left. Anybody else have a final thought? Yeah, John, go ahead.
One of the things, I mean, when you're in a burn, it's very interesting politically. You know, if you wrote the history of every burn and regional burn, it would be an amazing story. You know, death, you know, threats and all that sort of thing, court cases and so forth. There's a lot of drama behind the scenes, which we hide from the unsuspecting public. But one of the issues that often comes up is a burn splitting into two burns, or this budding off kind of thing. Now, sometimes, and perhaps I don't hear about too many of them, sometimes perhaps it happens graciously, but more often than I've heard, it sort of comes as, you know, some dramatic split or difference. I don't think that matters too much, as long as, I think that the good thing about it is that we do sort of keep replicating, not in such a way to take over the universe and consume all the resources of the universe, but, you know, it's interesting for me to sort of observe this, I think that what they call an allopathic effect, is that where you have one burn, it tends to suppress other people thinking about creating a burn in that space. There's a sort of a reluctance to intrude on the territory. And of course, sometimes there's also a bit of a hostility inside the existing burn. I'm not slandering anyone, I'm only speaking of personal experience. An apprehension about, you know, these people are talking about doing something we've slaved for years and they have no idea how hard it is and they're just barreling along and going to do it. And in a real sense, you do have to worry about the reputational damage that they might do to the name if they don't do it right. So what do? You know, do you just try and suppress them? Or my view is that you reach out to them and encourage them and say, great, good on you. We'll lend you every resource, and sort of step outside that anxiety and encourage them. And, you know, I talk to people and they sort of say, well, there's no room, not enough room for 2 burns in this state. And I'm thinking, that's crazy talk. You know, there's room for dozens and dozens of burns. You know, and if it means that we don't sell, you know, 3,000 tickets this year, Blazing Swan had a retro burn this year. Because of COVID, we went from 3,000 down to 1,500. And when I talk to people who were there, they say it was like going back to the beginning when it was everyone knew everyone. It was, you know, marvelous experience. And now, of course, I have to fight this feeling, and other people might be getting that too. When COVID, you know, takes the lid off, everyone wants to go back to the bigger burn. And actually, I'm sort of saying, well, why don't we stay with the smaller one and, you know, encourage a secondary? But organizations have this momentum. You know, they want to protect their patch, and there's often this mad desire to always go bigger and bigger. You know, that Burning Man monument was getting higher and higher for a while. I think it might have actually stopped at this point. But it's a matter of perhaps reining in the regional burns, even a regional burn, and allowing other burns to grow around us. And I don't mean that as criticism of any regional burn, by the way. I have to...
Totally not. We have all seen it happen. We have all seen it happen. Awesome. Thank you. We've got 3 minutes. I've got Marty as our last comment, and then I'll say thank you to everybody.
I'll try to get out in 3 minutes. So look, absolutely agree with what John's saying. This is what we've been thinking about at Common Arts. How big do we want to be? Like we're talking, you know, if we're an entirely volunteer organization, what's actually sustainable, not in terms of our environment, but in terms of our people. So with, you know, our first event's going to be max 500. I'm really not keen on it growing 1,000, 1,500 max. But I do think there's something to say about lots and lots of different events. That's again, an active conversation we've been having. It's like, well, you know, we'll do a 300-person event and a 500-person event and a 20-person event, and I think that is actually more sustainable and actually more in line with inclusivity than massive events. Now, actually, just sort of getting a bit theoretically, there's a number, what's called the Dunbar number, which is actually we can only make sense collectively of things at roughly around 150 people. Once it gets beyond that, our sense making, our opportunities for collaboration and sense making actually start to break down. And so we start to have to introduce these kind of informal structures or formal structures. And so I think that's a really interesting, I think that's really one way we need to think about scale and the problems that come with scale, and actually whether, you know, scale is massive events is what we want. I'm less convinced, and I actually think multiple small events is really where to go. Allow more and more people to, you know, evolve and spore and, you know, metamorphosize into different sort of ventures and things like that. So yeah, that was my piece in 3 minutes.
Spot on. Good job. Well, like if I had to truncate this conversation into a couple of sentences, I would say it sounds like we want more opportunity for hands-on interaction and learning, and we want more opportunities for other people to be able to create.
Cook it with emotion. Yeah, treat it like it's sacred, like it's sacred. Cook it with emotion. You gotta cook it, treat it like it's sacred. Gonna make some music together. Beautifuls, it is fantastic to see you again.